Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
Well, welcome to Brick by Brick. Thank you for joining me. We're at RIMS 2025. RIMS World, I think, is the official name that we have to say.
Riskworld.
Riskworld. That's right. You know it. Let's talk about risk. Let's talk about the world. Why don't you start off with a little bit about your background, where you work now, a little bit about your history so the audience can hear. They're all risk managers who watch the show.
Sure. So my name is Lianne Appelt. I lead the Enterprise Risk Management program at Salesforce. I've been there for a little over 5 years now. Prior to Salesforce, I worked at other tech companies like Oracle, PayPal, and eBay. And I've been in the risk kind of specific industry for about a little over a decade at this point.
When we think about risk and the facets of it, what does your role cover? What are you responsible for from a day-to-day perspective at Salesforce?
So my primary role is to align the company on what we consider to be the top risks that affect us. And that can be literally anything under the sun. So for a tech company, cyber is obviously one of our bigger, risk areas and exposures, but we also look at, corporate culture and finance and financial management and, organizational hierarchy and those types of things. So basically anything that can impact us, that's what is under my purview.
So I'm trying to imagine contextualizing Salesforce's risk appetite seems impossible, right? So what are some of the ways that you manage that team and you manage that process and from scaling it all the way up to the size that you have to manage at?
Yeah, so a lot of times in companies, they have an overarching risk appetite statement that characterizes how they think about risk.
Right.
We have something similar to that, but I don't find that very useful or tangible personally. And so my approach is to look at all of our risks across the portfolio and assign an appetite to that specific risk. Because we're not going to be taking the same amount of risk in different areas throughout the company.
Yeah.
And so, in tech, we're very innovative. So in innovation and product design and capabilities, we're going to be much more open to risk than in our financial management and our regulatory space. So I find it much more valuable to assign a risk appetite to each one of our risks.
One of the things I was really excited about having you on the show is to talk about AI. Obviously, Salesforce is part of the conversation when it comes to AI, but interesting to hear about that from behind the scenes and from how you manage against risks. You're doing a speaking engagement. What was your topic about and what did you cover in that?
Yeah, so today we talked a little bit about shadow AI, and that is something that is a huge concern or should be for a lot of companies on, as we're encouraging adoption of AI and, trying to upskill our employees, we want to enable and encourage AI use, but we also want to do it in a safe and effective way that is not exposing us to more risk. And so shadow AI is basically describing that situation where you have employees using AI in a way that can put your company at risk, or the AI technology itself is not effective and is potentially exposing you because it's not correct.
Yeah, that must be really hard at something like Salesforce to manage. But, we deal with a lot of risk management and third-party risk, right? So we talk a lot about that and all of the gaps there. Cyber, we talk a lot about, not all risk managers have even got their arms around that in construction and more traditional industries like manufacturing. And now we're adding AI risk both from an external standpoint and an internal one. I think it's really important to call out the internal risk. And this is that shadow AI where people are using tools that you're not aware of, like when they used to bring their cell phones to work or something like that, right? How do you balance, or what's your framework for balancing innovation with the risk?
It is exactly that. It is a balance because we want to encourage use of it. We want to make everyone's lives easier by utilizing AI. And one of the primary ways of doing that is to have internal protected tools that employees can use and train them on what is appropriate to utilize with those types of tools. So you have your governance, your policy related to AI, and hopefully you have AI technology that is unbiased and is appropriate for its use cases. And so having that option for employees to use and knowing that it's there, knowing that it's effective that's how you can keep them from going outside the company and using the ChatGPTs and OpenAIs and other tools that can, take your proprietary information outside the company.
Absolutely. How does this adapt to, is this fall under the idea of cybersecurity, or is this a whole category onto itself that you're looking at it as now?
It is a subset of cybersecurity because, in essence, it's an identity and access management issue. Because you want folks to be enabled, you want them to have access to the tools that they have access to, but you have to control and protect that like you do anything else. AI is nothing new. It's been on the scene for a decade or more at this point. It's just a matter of making
It's
sure
just easier for them to access and then have that data leak someplace else.
Exactly. It's very easy for that to happen. And not everybody thinks about data in the same way. So the way that we think about, we have to protect PII, we have to protect customer data, those are not things that people are generally putting into those tools. But it could be something as innocuous as, summarize this meeting for me, or I want to create a deck. Those types of activities that do save us time, but also have the opportunity to expose us in ways that we're not thinking about.
Does that mean you have to work very closely with your information technology team and your data warehousing team? Is it by putting and making the non-shadow AI tools and more accessible, actually better with better results? Like, what's the carrot part of the equation?
Exactly. Is you have to make sure that it is accessible and that they know how to use it and where it is. We use Google Suite, so everything connected to a Google device. And as you're using your technology every day, you're seeing all these new options for AI. And so it's knowing, all right, when I'm not under my protection of my network, I have to do something different than I do when I know I'm protected. And so with our Google Suite, we know that we have a protected layer that stays internal to the company. And that's something that we, as employees understand. But that training and policy and governance around that is crucial.
I mean, risk managers know about risk, right? Not all are technicians.
Exactly.
Right. So when I'm talking to some people in the construction industry, for an example, they might be talking about like, I can't even believe this quadrant is now under my job title. Like they rose up through the ranks, essentially moving from probably safety into risk management. And then you have risk management professionals, right, who come in and have like more academic frameworks that they apply to companies. Is more sometimes associated with the legal side of things. How do you balance like where you need to make these people very innovative and fast and your own education? Like, how do you make sure that you're up to speed?
It's two ways. I mean, you set up your controls so that they can't do what you don't want them to do, for one thing. But we're humans, so we're going to do things that are outside of what is even anticipated. So you have to, like I said, the training, the awareness, the culture around innovation and having the rules in place that everyone's familiar with. But I would say the biggest risk of what you described is people thinking that the technology is more sophisticated than humans.
Yes.
And the reliance or over-reliance on not great data.
Yeah, right.
And so, there's, again, that balance of you have to have a human to verify and make sure that the data that you're getting out of AI is accurate, is correct, is unbiased, and is ethical. And those are all things that not everybody knows to look for or knows to verify.
Let's talk about a specific risk you have, and if that falls into your purview, it might not. But what about like how customers might be hooking Salesforce up to AI? How do you manage that? And does that fall in the same category for you guys, or are you focused on internal risk from employee?
It's everything. So anything that customers are doing, we are very hyper-focused on trust and enabling our customers. And one thing that is, really critical for our success as a company is that our customers know how to use AI, are using it ethically, and are following the same protocols that we would. Same with third parties. It's a similar situation. Something that is interesting that is happening in the tech market is that, there's a lot of hesitation around AI, and there's a lot of kind of caution that customers have on utilizing AI. And so when we're injecting our products with AI and we're, really encouraging this agentic AI that is a whole new flavor of AI, that's something that, there's a steep learning curve. Not everybody knows what that means or how to use it. And so we're kind of internally looking at training and upskilling employees, but we're also reliant on our customers to also be skilled and, knowing how to use the AI that we're giving them.
Right. And I mean, that's always a big Salesforce thing, is to educate the users. You had to educate them about the safety of the cloud, and you now have to educate them about the safety of AI. But, when you guys were trying to educate people on the safety of the cloud, it was like, hey, you don't need all these on-prem things. And now maybe you're saying, hey, you need to be careful. Does that feel different? Does that feel just like maturity? Does it feel like this is a new market? Like, I'm asking you basically, can you liken this to another risk that you've had in your career? Is it just another type of risk, or is it something new and actually something exciting? And, what's your take on it?
It's certainly new and exciting, but it's not anything.
The same risk management profile, like stuff going to be applied to it.
Yeah.
So people don't need to treat it like something that's they have no
they just
control
need
over.
to be cautious and be aware of what the risks are and to use it appropriately.
As a software company ourselves for TrustLayer, we've seen some customers take a hardline approach that they're not going to buy software that has AI in it,
Yep.
which also is not probably the right approach to manage the risk either.
No.
Right. So it's going to
Avoiding the risk altogether is not.
there's no business without risk, right? That's the whole thing. I'm going to ask a question that they asked me to ask, but if you can't answer this, because it's a big one, which is, how do you foresee the biggest risks in the tech industry unfolding over the next 2 years?
That is a big question, but I think what, sort of similar to not adopting AI, that is a choice, and that is a huge risk.
Yeah.
And we in the tech industry in general are in a huge innovation transformation space where it's easy to get disrupted now.
Yes.
And how quickly other competitors are able to accelerate their products and services. You have to be on, you have to have a vision, you have to know what you want, and you have to have your customers on board. So these are all things that we're potentially impacted by in tech. And I think that's going to disrupt a lot of companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And open a lot of risk up.
Yes.
Because yes, you can do some of the stuff with just a standard AI model that you can with other tools, but those tools have safety guards put on them. They have access, they have permissions, they have all sorts of stuff associated to it. So I've already seen a lot of people trying to cut budgets, because we're also in a time when people need to cut budgets, right? Let's be real about that, but then make the wrong choices on where to cut those budgets, right? I think right now, partnering with someone like Salesforce is a smart bet. They can help you take care of some of that risk. Let's play a game of risky or too risky. How about that?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's get over there. Okay, so this one's about work. Let's start with that, okay? Accepting a project without a clear scope or objectives, risky or too risky?
I think too risky.
Too risky? Yeah, I thought you were going to go risky. Okay, so what's too risky about not having a scope defined in the beginning of the project? You must run into that all the time.
I mean, there was a second part of that. There was no scope defined or objective.
Or objectives.
The objective is the key part. If you don't know what you want to get out of a project, what is the project?
Exactly. Too risky. I would say the same thing. As a project manager myself, I would say too risky. Let's go to some real life scenarios. Would you ever swim with sharks without a cage? Is that too risky?
What kind of sharks?
Ooh, good question. No one's ever asked that.
They're nurse sharks. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, it would just be risky. You would enjoy it. And
I don't even think it would be risky. They're not.
Well,
they're friendly.
Merging with a company, there's a lot of that happening right now, without conducting a cultural compatibility assessment. Risky or too risky?
I say risky on that one.
Yeah. How do you bring when you guys acquire an organization and you have to acquire all their risk and all of their team, how do you bring them on to that? Is it an expansion of the program? Is it a reclassification? What are your recommendations when you're facing something like that?
We have a pretty well-defined M&A playbook for those instances. We've, in the last decade, brought on a number of companies. Slack is some more recent one, Tableau before that, MuleSoft and others. And we have run into situations. And I think it's really inherent to those acquisitions that there is a mismatch sometimes of culture.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a really small startup type of company that comes into a large corporate environment.
Yeah.
And the folks that work there for a reason, because they like the small startup-y, fluid, flexible situation. And they come into Salesforce and they're like, I don't know about this.
Yep.
So that's a risky one, but it's not too risky because otherwise we would never acquire companies.
What's been the most surprising element of working at a company the size of Salesforce and the risk that you have to manage?
I would say surprising is maybe having such a small team. When you think about the breadth of and scope of risks, it's hard to do that with one person. But that seems to be kind of the trend in tech. I have a community of ERM and tech folks. There's a Slack group that we all kind of collaborate, and it's kind of similar across those other companies. So it's finding ways to overcome that and being a small but mighty team. But that was a surprise to me.
Anything that you want to cover?
What's the most interesting response you've gotten in your game?
In my game?
Yeah.
Usually risk manager. So it depends. So a lot of times they're tech entrepreneurs who do things in insure tech. They always choose risky, but almost all risk managers choose too risky for everything. And so it's just kind of a fun thing. But it mostly is just didn't have the right acceptance criteria. So what my favorite part of this whole game is when people go, the nurse shark thing, they break it by saying, well, yeah, you can do anything as long as you just define the box that it's in.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's ask one more question about the shadow AI stuff, which was, what was one of the compelling ideas being presented on the panel?
I think just generally speaking, we're kind of in this space of, building the plane as we're flying it with AI. And one of the concepts that has come up over and over is that we want to use it. We want to be more efficient in our day to day, but how do we do that in a controlled and least risky way?
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't know that we've necessarily perfected that, but that's something that we are really striving and aspiring to do.
Do you think that it's healthy and appropriate the way the industry of the risk managers, let's say, are coming together to try to talk about what we need to be doing while we're pursuing it? I would say for the insurance industry, which we're all surrounded by, for the tech industry, those are conversations of maturity that haven't really happened before.
I think they need to happen. I mean, when you look at the news and you have the Amazons and Samsung and Zillow have had really high profile instances where AI did not serve them well, or, they had some instance that, made the news.
Yeah.
That's what we're all looking to avoid. So if we're not having those conversations, we're setting ourselves up for some
That's right. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to be here.
I appreciate it.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that people can build the physical world around us. Head over to TrustLayer.io, and then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.